we go all the way over to the two-fund strategy, that's half in the S&P 500, half in small cap value. It grows to 67 million. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to get the same thing the next 55 years. How can we possibly know? But I suspect that all of these combinations will give a return that will be higher than the S&P 500. Maybe not by much, and maybe not at all. We can't know. But I do believe that creating more diversification, as those of you who remember our quilt charts, and we're going to be talking about the quilt charts in a couple of weeks, showed that by adding 4 equity asset classes instead of 1, reduced the volatility substantially. Now, here again, we have on table A2A, we show the same combinations, but with monthly rebalancing instead of annual, and instead of 60 million, 67 million in the two-fund strategy, it's 64.7 million. And you can take the time, I hope you will, to dig into these. Now, let me just say something very important here. I'm hoping that you will use one of these portfolios for some part of your portfolio, of your total portfolio. It may only be for your Roth IRA. It may be for your tax, whatever it might be. I'm hoping somewhere some of these things will fit into what you're building for the long term. But I do think that it is important to know more than what you see right here. So before you go making a choice, we've already recorded it, and we'll have a link to it in the notes, and that is to the sound investing portfolios that show the return by decade, show the returns by years, show the best of years, the worst of years, the standard deviation, the Sharpe ratio, the Sortino ratio on all of these different portfolios. They are all important things for you to know as you consider what's right for me. So now we've looked at a 50-50 stocks, U.S. and international. No bonds. No bonds is going to, the addition of bonds is going to come up in a few weeks. We'll get there. That'll be the fine-tuning your asset allocation in terms of how much you should have in bonds. But right now, we're equities all the time. But now I want to look at just a slightly different combination, and maybe more like the combination that you would have some sense of comfort with, and that is table A1B. And for those of you who are listening to this as a podcast, we'll of course have links to these tables for you. But in this particular case, instead of 50-50, it's 70% U.S. and 30% international. And you will see, if you sit down and compare table A1B with the table we just looked at a few minutes ago, table A1A, you will see there are some differences, not as great as you might think. Now, I think you'll see some bigger differences when we look at the individual portfolios. But here in the ultimate buy and hold portfolio, if we just go to the portfolio 7 that takes into consideration all of those 10% positions, but when in international only 30% instead of 50, notice in portfolio 7, which includes the emerging market, that there's 53,487,000. If we go back a couple of slides, we will see it was 53,439,000. So the differences are not great. You will see differences in a few minutes when you look at the individual portfolios. So if you're going all the way across the board, having all 10, it isn't going to, at least based on the past, be much different than what we know from the 50-50. But as we move to the individual portfolios, there are some differences, considerable differences. Let's just look for a second. I'm not going to go through them all. These tables are for you to go over and study in whatever depth you want to understand this information. But I want you to look, let's say, at the worldwide 4-fund strategy. Notice the $100,000 investment in 1970 with a 70-30 U.S. international portfolio grew to 64 million. On table 2A, it was 57 million. So that is a substantial difference. If we look at the table A2A 50-50 for the worldwide all value, you had about 76 million at the end of that period. With the 70-30 break, it was 82 million. So what does this say? It says that particularly in the value area, there was a really substantial advantage over that period of time to be overweighted to U.S. So, and by the way, we don't have tables for 60-40 or 80-20 but I think that you'll get a feeling for that as you look at the differences between these two tables. For example, if you wanted to figure out what 60-40 looked like, you could look at the 50-50 and the 70-30 and know that it's somewhere in between. It's not very complex. And again, by the way, at the 70-30 level, as we look at table A to B, and we look at the, for example, the 2-fund strategy over that period of time, well, that wouldn't make any difference whether it was 50-50 or 70-30 because that's an all U.S. It has to be something that's a combination. But if we look at the worldwide all value annual rebalancing, $82 million approximately. If we look at that same portfolio with monthly rebalancing, $75.6 million, that's a substantial difference. And interestingly enough, in that particular case, this is not always going to be true. The idea that by rebalancing more often, that the volatility is going to be lower. Here's a case where the volatility with rebalancing monthly turned out to be even higher. So almost no rule that you make for investing. It's like we say, there is a premium for being in stocks over bonds. Well, there are lots of relatively long periods of time where that just simply isn't so. So there you go. This hopefully inspires you to take the time to go listen or watch, and I think watching will be better, the piece that we did on the sound investing portfolios. And I hope that this gives you greater not only understanding, but confidence that by combining different equity asset classes, that it is just as important as having lots of stocks in your portfolio. Because as I look at the S&P 500, $100,000 growing into almost 30 million, and I see that every combination, whether it's simply adding small cap value or adding the 3 other major U.S. equity portfolios. In all cases, the returns long-term were significantly higher. I just can't stamp the word guarantee on it. I know you wish I could. By the way, I wish I could as well. So thanks for listening and watching. I hope you'll share this information with friends and relatives and folks that you think it would be worthwhile to learn more about this whole area of diversification. And thank you for watching.